All right, I think we better think about making a start. So congratulations to each of you for A, getting up early, and B, finding your way to a different room. If it makes you feel any better, I did walk backwards and forwards 2 or 3 times this morning. It was fantastic exercise. So welcome along to Dev 345, the Accidental Team Foundation Server Admin. So my name's Anthony Borton. I'll be presenting this session for you. So a little bit about me. I'm a Visual Studio ALM MVP. I've been a Microsoft Certified Professional since 1993. Who's done a Microsoft exam? Oh, that's fantastic. Anyone done exam 001? Now, that was that exam back in 93. It was MS-DOS 5 and microcomputer hardware. It was a prerequisite for accreditation in Microsoft Word version 2. So knowing registers of the CPU and all those kinds of things really helps in bolding text, I've learnt. But the certifications have certainly come a long way since then. I've done about 55 exams since that time, and I've been a Microsoft Certified Trainer since '96. So I guess more recently, or certainly since the release of Team Foundation Server, I've spent most of my time helping organisations adopt ALM best practices around Team Foundation Server. I've written and I deliver 5 different courses on TFS, including 5 courses now ready to go for 2012. And the best part about that is I get to work with some very diverse teams and groups around the world. I get to do a lot of travel, but for all of my travel, this is certainly my first time in the Netherlands. So it's been quite interesting to see somewhere new. All right, so let's kick on. In terms of the accidental TFS admin, last year, Martin Woodward, who I'm hoping many of you may know, introduced audiences at TechEd North America to the accidental TFS admin. He then asked me to update that for the 2012 release, and it's been an absolute pleasure doing that. So I delivered this session in North America 2 weeks ago and have the pleasure of delivering it now. So what is the accidental TFS admin? You know, the last person to touch the TFS server, the person that accidentally happened to install it. They thought, this is interesting. Let's just run, set up, and see what happens here. And before you know it, you're the TFS admin. Sometimes it gets worse. Sometimes, you just happen to be away getting a coffee. And while you're gone, the team votes you to be the TFS admin. Maybe someone set it up and then they've run away, they've left, and you're left administering something you had nothing to do with. Nothing to do in terms of the setup. I'm curious, so who's an accidental TFS admin? Excellent. Who didn't get the message the room's changed? Excellent. Stay here, this session is much better. I must say, the room change is much better. 3A is huge. There's like 500 seats there, and this is a niche session. It was never going to have 500 people. You would have been sprinkled out, and I would have had to have walked even more to say hello to each of you. So anyway, that's the accidental TFS admin. So my goal is to turn you from this into this. Oh, sorry, my mistake. There you go, that. So we'll transform you into an accidental TFS admin for 2012. In terms of putting the session together, it was a challenge. I run a 3-day admin course. How can I get 3 days of technical content condensed down into about 60 minutes with a bit of Q&A at the end? Well, the answer is you jam it all in and you go really quickly and hope. We'll see how that goes. I timed it really well in North America, so to give myself some challenges, I put more content in. Not the sign of a wise person. What's facing the accidental TFS admin this year? Well, certainly what I would expect, the biggest thing facing you this year is going to be a consideration of the upgrade to 2012. And as a result of that, I've chosen to make a lot of the session at the start all about what that upgrade experience will look like. To help with that, who's currently running on, say, TFS 2005? That's good. 2008? Not so bad. Some 2010? Oh, this is wonderful. Some 2012s? Interesting. None of the above. And let's just have some fun. Source safe. Good. So we're going to spend some time talking about upgrading from TFS 2010 to 2012. We'll talk about upgrading a little bit more generally. We'll go through the process of backward compatibility. It's always nice to go and upgrade that server to the latest version. Welcome, gentlemen. Come on in, come on in. It's always important to maintain backward compatibility. We can go and kick our server up to a TFS 2012 server, but what about the developers that are still maintaining legacy code? There's plenty of VB6 code still out there. It could be a .NET 1.1 application. Or maybe it's even just our 2010s that we're not ready to upgrade yet. So upgrading the server is all well and good, but we need to maintain a very high backward compatibility bar to keep our teams happy. And if you're the TFS admin, you find out very quickly if they're not happy. We're also going to have a talk about upgrading project features. One of the absolute best things about the timing of the conference is 5 weeks ago, this would have been a terrible story. But now it's a great story. You'll be extraordinarily happy with something called the Feature Enablement Wizard. We're going to have a look at new configuration automation, and that's a very short thing. It's a command line. That's never going to win an applause. But we're going to go in and I'm going to show you how you can go and quickly provision a new build controller, a new build agent in a matter of moments from the command line. So these sorts of admin tasks have become incredibly much easier now. We're going to have a look at configuring permissions. And that configuring permissions will still be a talk about 2010 as well as 2012. It is probably the number one thing that I find people get wrong because it's not intuitive. We'll also have a look at how some of the permissions have changed in 2012. We'll talk about introducing teams and what teams mean, because people will start using these things. They're absolutely fantastic. That's what's on the agenda. So upgrading TFS 2010 to 2012, what does that look like? The first thing we're going to have a look at is our prerequisites. The prerequisites will largely determine how much fun you're going to have. And that's a little bit sarcastic. In terms of the operating systems, and to be very clear, don't worry about, there's a lot of information on the slides. Good news is you get to download the slides. You get to have a look at the videos. And while I can't impart days' worth of knowledge to you in the morning, I'll certainly make sure you know where to look when you get back to the office. So the information you're seeing here comes directly out of the ALM Ranges Upgrade Guidance White Paper. So you can jump onto Codeplex. I've got a link in the slides for you shortly. You can jump onto Codeplex. You can download all of this information. There are some great walkthroughs. There are some great checklists there. So if you want to make sure that upgrade goes smoothly, goes well, the Ranger Guidance is a great place to start. So looking at our operating systems up here, fundamentally, if you've got a 64-bit operating system, you're in a much nicer place. And if you look down the right-hand side, we really want to be at Server 2008, 64-bit, with Service Pack 2, or we want to be up here. Any of the others are not supported by 2012, so suddenly your upgrade has changed from an in-place upgrade to a migration-based upgrade. The next lot of prerequisites to consider is SQL Server. So there's pretty much good news there, but you're going to need to go to at least SQL Server 2008 R2 if you're not already. And then with SharePoint, well, that's actually really good. Anything that was supported on 2010 is supported on 2012. So that's hopefully maps a little bit of the prerequisite requirements for you. The two upgrade options you've got, you can do an in-place upgrade, and I'll talk very briefly about what that looks like, or we can do a migration-based upgrade. Now, this is a terrible slide. You get kicked out of trainer school for a slide like that. The good news is it is in that PDF for you, and it does quite succinctly map the options that are available to you. Down the left-hand side, if you have a look at what your current configuration is, just work your way left to right, and you're going to find out what's available for you. You'll see down the bottom there, we've got to do make sure you upgrade your service packs. But if your machine is a reasonably new machine, if you're running 2012, 2010, you've got your service packs on there, well then you can choose in-place or migration. And hopefully that's where most of you will be. An in-place upgrade. There's a couple of things here. First and foremost, in my experience, and I've done a lot of upgrades, if your server is happy and healthy, your upgrade will go much better. I know that sounds rather obvious, but the majority of support questions, the majority of people on forums that are having issues and challenges, almost always, those challenges and problems were made worse by the upgrade process. So the BPA tool, the Best Practices Analyzer. The Best Practices Analyzer spends about 10 minutes looking at all the configuration and gives you a report to tell you how healthy, how happy your TFS server is. Who's run that one? All right, put your hands back up. Who's run the Best Practices Analyzer? Great. Keep your hands up if you've run it more than once. Keep your hands up if you run it once every 4 weeks or so. Fail. All right, so BPA tool is your friend. If you're a TFS admin, this tool is fantastic. It's fully automated. It's one of the power tools. You drop it onto your TFS server. You go and say, run a health scan for me. It spends 10 minutes and says, hey, this is the good news or the not so good news. And if it finds any issues or problems, in most circumstances, it provides a hyperlink for you with information about how you can fix the problem, or certainly points you in the right direction. So you've got to run it at least once. If I ever do an installation, I'll install the product, everything's great, run the BPA tool. Do some configuration, put in a service packet, put your build controllers and build agents there. Run the BPA tool. And then configuration changes. Passwords may expire on our service accounts if it's not set up properly. We can run out of disk space. The fact that configuration changes over time, group policy comes down and so forth, means we should run the BPA tool periodically. In fact, we can run that tool as part of a scheduled task. We can say, hey, go and run that tool automatically every 4 weeks and drop the results into this folder for me. So BPA tool very much is your friend. Okay? So you'll see in any stage where we're talking about an upgrade or a migration, run the BPA tool. Now what we'd want to do here is run the BPA tool for 2010. Make sure it's okay, make sure it's happy. Then look at the upgrade options here. Back up the server and do a trial restore. Go into Control Panel, Programs and Features, and remove 2010. That's a bit scary. But all of your information stays there in the database, in the data tier. You'll then go and install TFS 2012, and the configuration you'll choose will be upgrade. You'll answer a couple of questions, and then it will go and configure itself, update the database schema, and hey presto, you've got a 2012 box. It can be that easy. It can be a lot harder. Once that's done, what am I going to say next? It's on the board as well. You're going to run the BPA tool again, but you're going to go and get the power tools for 2012. You'll install those power tools for 2012 and then run that best practices analyzer. So you want to run a health check before, do your upgrade, run that health check again. And then run it again in the future for all those hands. All right? One of the most interesting things teaching the 3-day admin class is you talk about the BPA tool. And then during the lab, you walk around and you look at all the people that are promoted back into the office and are doing it on their live server. And then the theoretical exercise becomes a whole lot more practical. As people say, oh, this is my production server and it's got all these red things on it. It adds a sense of realism to the classroom. All right. A migration-based upgrade, what that looks like for us. Well, firstly, this is going to be 2 servers. Now, this is a great opportunity for us if we're moving hardware, if some of our prerequisites don't really match what we need. So we have a couple of servers here. Again, choose a time when the server can be taken offline, run the BPA tool again. We're going to go in and stop the team project collection. We're going to detach that. We're going to move it as a database from the old data tier to the new data tier. We'll go into the administration console. We'll then reattach that team project collection, and that will automatically run the upgrade for us. And then, I'm a broken record, then we run the best practices analyzer again. Now, there's a little bit more detail in here. I'm not trying to oversimplify it. I'm not trying to oversell it to you. That's very high level. But if you have a look at the Ranger's guidance, the Ranger's guidance provides all of the information for you, including those checklists. So follow those checklists. The guidance goes through a number of different scenarios. Look at the scenario that most closely matches your situation, and then it's going to tell you exactly what you need to do. There's a couple of post-migration steps. There's some things we need to do around SharePoint, around the reports, and they're very well documented in that Ranger's guidance for us. Our reports and our team projects aren't upgraded, and we need to re-establish some of those links back to SharePoint. So there's the links for you. You can go and have a look firstly at the installation guide. So the installation guide that's on the TFS Media includes a section on upgrade. So that's your first point. Second point there is that link that allows you to go and download the Ranger's guidance. It's a 97-page PDF, and as you look through that guidance, look for your scenario and follow the steps. It'll make your upgrade experience a whole lot better and keep your teams a whole lot happier with you. I was going to show you the PDF there. No. You can download and have a look at that PDF. Upgrading from SourceSafe. Now, none of you indicated that you were using SourceSafe, and that's really, really good news. So let me skim through this reasonably quickly. It's also really good news for us. In terms of upgrading from Visual SourceSafe, if you're doing this into 2010, it was a whole lot of work. It was command line tools, it was modifying XML files. It wasn't much fun. Did anyone do that? Wait. Do you agree it wasn't much fun? Running analyze, going and doing our user mapping file, go back and run convert, and that could sometimes take a long time. And the experience was, honestly, you'd run analyze, and it'd come back with 10,000 errors. And I'm not exaggerating. It was probably a handful of errors many times, but it still scared the pants off you the first time you saw it. So I want to show you what it looks like now. We go into the TFS administration console. We go down here to Visual SourceSafe Upgrade. In the release preview, this is only a placeholder. The wizard will be out much closer to the release. But what the wizard experience will look like is this. You'll go in there, you'll point to your repository. You'll provide a password. You'll tell it what parts of the SourceSafe repository you want to bring across. You'll say where you want to put it. You'll say, do you want full history or just grab from the tip of the source tree? And then you'll tell it where it can use some temporary storage, a bit of SQL Express. And then magically, it does all the hard work. Now, for those of you that have done it the hard way, this is 1,000 times better. Okay, but I won't focus on that. No one indicated that there were some SourceSafe users in here. So, backward compatibility was the next thing. As we get our server up to 2012, what about all of our existing users? Well, there's some great stories there. Firstly, for your users of Visual Studio 2010, the Visual Studio 2010 SP1 Team Foundation Server 2010 Compatibility GDR. Nice long name. Remember that one for me. So you can download that, and that'll provide compatibility for all of your Visual Studio 2010 users. They will need to have Service Pack 1 installed, but then you just download this little tool, and those 2010 clients are talking happily and easily back to TFS 2012. Likewise for 2008. Again, so long as you've got Service Pack 1 on the 2008 Visual Studio machines, you just need to download that great big long name up there from the link provided, and those 2008 users can talk back to TFS 2012, too many numbers, nice and easily. You can also go side by side. I think I skipped over that. That was one of the points on the slide a couple of slides ago. You can also have 2010 Visual Studio and 2012 Visual Studio side by side. Okay, so that maintains a very high compatibility bar there. If you happen to be using any of these other clients, we still have the MISCI provider, the Microsoft Source Control Client Interface. You can go and download the MISCI provider, and that MISCI provider will mean that any of those environments can now check in, check out, and talk directly and natively to TFS 2012. So pretty much we've got an incredibly high compatibility bar. Okay, feature enablement. For any of you that have upgraded from, say, 2008 to 2010, if you've done an in-place upgrade on the server, what you will have found is that the upgrading of the server generally isn't so bad. But then all of the existing team projects are still stuck at the functional level of the previous version. Okay, so this is one of the key things that you end up doing as a TFS administrator. So let's have a look at some of the features. I'm just going to wind the clock back. 2008, because a few of you are still on 2008, we want to upgrade to TFS 2010. Some of the features that we really, really want. Why do we want to do this upgrade? Well, they're listed there. Test cases. So support for test cases, shared steps, those things were introduced firstly in 2010. We want hierarchical work items. We want the 13 named link types in our work item tracking system. We want lab management. We want the agile planning workbooks. We want to use branch visualization in our source tree. So these are some of the driving reasons that would have hopefully jumped you up from 2008 to the 2010 CFS. So when you did your server upgrade, you had to go and enable those features manually, and it was a fair bit of work. Who's done this? Ooh, not so many of you. Okay. I'm not going to go through those in a lot of detail, but what it shows you there is it's a very manual process. We needed to add some link types. We needed to do some categories, modify bug work items, run command line tools, change permissions, enable workbooks, manually convert branches, enable lab management, fix all the reports because they were all broken. It took a couple of hours and then a couple of weeks to iron out the little bugs and bits and pieces. It wasn't much fun, but you had to do it. Let's move forward from 2010 to 2012. So most of you are using Team Foundation Server 2010 today. So what's going to drive you to move to 2012? Or your teams, more to the point? They're going to want to get access. Whoa. Cool. Missed a slide there. Disappeared. Must be in the other room. Anyway, we'll move past that. There's going to be some great reasons. We'll recap them again in just a moment. Once you do the change from 2010 to 2012, there's a number of changes you get for free. You don't have to change anything. So some of these include the fact that our description field changes from plain text to HTML. Someone out there's got to think that's cool. It's really nice. You know, you go and copy some rich text, some stuff in an email or something, paste it into the description field, and all the formatting falls off. It's a little thing, but it's so good to have that. We get the ability to drop images in line into those fields now. That's another really good thing. Merge on save for work items, finally. And if you wanted to talk about, concurrency in teams, if these two gentlemen here, you start editing a source control file, you edit the same file, you check in first, you go to check in, and it says, hey, there's a conflict. Merge them, life is good. You would expect that for any good version control system from day one. Two guys over here are working with work items. So you've got a bug, you're making a bit of a change. You happen to go and put some extra information into the same bug. First guy gets in, great. Second guy, not so great. You have to lose all of the pending changes to that work item. I shouldn't say pending changes, that implies something different. Whatever you've changed in that work item is gone and you have to redo those changes. So merge on save for work item is a nice thing we get for free. They changed the history tab. They give us just a little bit of extra filtering capability inside history. We get, this isn't a selling thing, but Team Queries changes its name to Shared Queries. We automatically get a new default team for each of our projects, and the virtual directory name changes. So this is something that just happens. You don't have to do anything for it. So you get this for free, and you lose some stuff for free. Does that sound like a sales pitch? It's not so bad. So you can no longer create folders under My Favorites. Did anyone do that? Be brave. There's nothing wrong with it. Most people just didn't know it was there. So no longer putting folders under My Favorites. You can no longer drag reports in there as well. You can't drag documents into My Favorites. Again, most people didn't use it, so we're not going to miss it. Work item only view users. That group has changed. That group's no longer managed that way, and I'll give you a demonstration of that before we finish this morning. Several functions have been deprecated out of Team Web Access. That's not to say we've lost them. They've just moved to a different home, and generally the features have improved and been made better. So that's all good news for us. The product backlog and iteration backlog workbooks, those two Excel files, they're no longer supported. Who used them? Yeah, 3, that's all right, 4. If you did use them, that functionality is now baked straight into the product. Our task boards, our agile planning, all those things are now straight away in the tool, and they're much better than they were back in those spreadsheets. So we shouldn't miss them too much. And then finally, if you've got any custom controls you've written for work item tracking, those custom controls kind of won't work anymore. At best, a recompile against a new object model. At worst, probably just a little bit of coding there. That's the slide I thought I'd lost. So, what are the driving things that we really want to get out of that upgrade? Firstly, our agile planning tools. If we're going to upgrade our server to TFS 2012, one of the first things we want are the agile planning tools. We want the task boards. We want the real-time burn down chart. We want the drag and drop, all that sort of capability. Big plus. We want the code review workflow. Who's seen the code review stuff in the session this week? You know, the code review for developers is absolutely fantastic now and maybe a little bit overdue as well. But it's good that it's there now. We have feedback, so stakeholder feedback, storyboard integration, and I probably shouldn't put that last one up there, hidden types. It's a category that we would generally have needed to edit the process template to enable. Not all work item types should be able to be created by saying new work item. Some work item types should only be created by the tools designed to create them. So this is a category to help us determine which ones we need. So to enable these capabilities, up until about 5 weeks ago, was a lot of work. Now we have something called the Feature Enablement Wizard. And what that's going to do is, it's a little tool that has a look to determine what is missing from our team project. It then identifies where we can find the features that are missing, and it implements those features for us. Now remember what I said, previously this was generally a couple of hours work, and then, you know, over the next couple of weeks you'll find a few things you may have missed. So this could potentially be a huge time saver. Now I won't go into the exact specifics of it. They're in the slides. You can look through this at any stage you like, but it's going to wire up the agile planning tools. It'll go and give us our code review workflows. It'll go and put the feedback things in that we need. It will enable things that we need in my work. You know, it'll go and put the little action statements in there that we need. Okay, that was a change from 2010 to 2012. In 2010, it was sort of strange. A developer would do work, and then when they checked in, they identified the work item that they had just been working on after the event. So in 2012, one of the things that you hopefully have seen already is that in my work, we changed that quite a bit. A developer will say, hey, I'm going to start work on this one, and then do their work. And we're able to grab that and then make a state change from the work item from to do across to in progress, so that we can update that state, update it and display it on the task boards. So this goes and puts in the plumbing that we need to make that happen. It also goes and enables storyboarding for us and goes and sets up those hidden work item types. So let's have a look at what that looks like. All right. So what I've got here is a team project in 2012. I've called it Agile V5. So it is a team project created using the MSF Agile 5 process template, a 2010 template. Now it's on a 2012 server, and what this accurately portrays is a 2010 TFS server that has been upgraded to 2012, but our team projects are still at that functional level of 2010, yeah? So with this team project, I'm going to simply go in and say, I want to request a code review. And of course, code review wasn't there in 2010. So it gives me a little message. To request a code review from your peers, enable the new features. And it gives me a hyperlink to do that. If I leave out of there for a moment, go back to my home, go into the web access, I'll pop into the administration website, and over here it'll show me that features are available for the team project, but they must be configured before we can use them. So let's go ahead and say configure features. It's gone in there and said, well, we've had a look at this team project and identified these new features are missing. All right, let's verify that. It goes in there and says, well, look, the features that are missing can be found in this process template, MSF for Agile Software Development 6.0 Preview 4. Would you like to use those ones? Well, that sounds pretty good. Now remember, this took a couple of hours before. So let's time this one. Ready? Configure. 1 second, 2 seconds, and we're done. That's really cool stuff. Yes, sir? What happens if you have a customized template? Excellent question. You don't believe it will magically do this? I'm glad you're a skeptic. And I'm really glad you asked the question. So if you've got a customized template, it's going to really come down to what level of customization you've done. Okay? If you've got a very heavily customized process template, if you've got certain states or field names that are used in these new process templates that would cause a conflict, if there is any indication whatsoever to this tool that there may be a problem, it will not do it for you. It has to be conservative. First sign of danger, it'll say, no, I won't do this. And what that means for you is you then go back through the manual steps. Okay? My advice, take a copy of the TPC onto a different machine, try the wizard. I mean, again, it is designed to be conservative. If there is any doubt, it will not muck with your process template. But hopefully, for the majority, I mean, if you've made simple additive changes, if you've followed the rules, if the ref names for the fields you've used are unique, if you've followed the rules and done your customization well, this is probably going to work just fine. Okay? That has saved you hours of work. All right? I better prove that it worked, though. So I'm just going to drop back into the website. I'm going to go and say I want to create a new user story. I'm going to go down here and do some typing, and straight away we can turn that into a hyperlink. So that field is now HTML. I can go and add an inline graphic. You'll see up here that storyboards have been enabled for this work item type. I'll exit out of here. Let's drop back to Visual Studio now, and I'll say I want to refresh the metadata cache. And let's request a code review. Now, I'm still getting a message there, but it's a different message. It's simply saying, yes, I'd like to do the code review, but you've got no pending changes to review. But the feature is certainly enabled now and ready to go. Uld's got a very good blog post where he provides a PowerShell script, so you can also go and say, look, for the 20 team projects in this collection, I'd like to programmatically go through and enable all the features, please. So you can do it the way that I've demonstrated to you, or there is also a very, very good automated way to go through and enable features on your team projects. Okay. New configuration automation. So this one's a little bit harder to make look fantastic. In the TFS config command line utility, they've added a new option, and that new option is unattend. And with this unattend option, we can, as the name implies, do a lot of unattended automation through scripting. From the command line, we can go and configure version control, work item tracking, our test case management. We can go and configure our integration with SharePoint and reporting services. We can go and work with our built environment. We can reinstall application tiers. I can go and install SharePoint from this little command line tool quickly and easily, and a whole lot more. So let's have a very quick look at that. So if I drop back over here, what I've done there, and just in the interest of time, I have taken one small shortcut. I've run TFS config, unattend, that's the new thing, /create, and I've said I'm interested in the build. I've said create an unattend file called create.ini, and it's gone ahead and done that for me. One of the frustrating things with unattended files was trying to find what they needed to look like. You had to go and jump into a search engine, find them, copy, paste. This goes and creates the boilerplate text for you. I then go and open that up in Notepad. And that's probably a little small at the back of the room. But it's got commented information in here to tell me exactly what information I need to provide. So if I need to be able to quickly go and create a build controller, go and add a build agent, go and do any of these things, I can do it here. I can go in there and say I want to add one build agent. I want to create a new controller, and my controller will be called My Controller. It tells me the collection that this is relevant to, and are you using the built-in service account, which is always a very, very bad idea. The service account we're going to use And in the interest of this virtual machine, I'm going to use the administrator account. You would never do that in the real world. Sometimes that does need saying. So we'll go in with VSALM administrator. And I managed to click on something very interesting there. Try that again. And the service account password we want to use, just look the other way for a moment, is that one. And we've got some other settings there if you want to use them. I'll go ahead and say save that. The next thing I do is say I want to go and run it. So TFS config will pass across the unattend option. This time, instead of creating the file, we want to actually do the configuration change. And the unattend file to use is called create.ini. Now, normally you would do a space /verify, but in the interests of time, I'll live on the edge. And it's done. Now, that's just going to go and write out the log file for me. But if I go across into here, pop into Team Foundation Server, into the admin console, what I've just done there is I've gone and added a controller and an agent. So for any of these sorts of repetitive tasks that you may need to do, doing it through this unattended option on TFS config is suddenly just a whole lot easier. And remember from the previous slides, this could be going and installing SharePoint extensions. It could be working with build. It could be working with our version control proxy. Any of those kinds of things we can do in a very automated and repetitive manner. Okay, the next thing, permissions and security. So one of the biggest challenges that I generally find is people struggle with security in TFS. And one of the main things about that, one of the main reasons, I've got to say, is that people simply don't understand how it fits together. I've got a screenshot up here from from Team Explorer 2010. And most people looking at this will say that we've got a hierarchy here with our team project in it, and we're looking at TFS. But actually what's really happening there is Team Explorer is connecting to TFS for work items, build and source control. But where you see documents, that's actually a live connection across to your SharePoint infrastructure, which requires rights and permission authentication to populate that information. Likewise, if you look in the reports folder up there, that's going to SQL reporting services, and you need rights and permissions over there. So the big challenge is that generally security for TFS is about security in 3 places. A very common thing that I see is, and it's a little bit hard, those little red crosses up there. You know, the very first time a TFS administrator goes in and says, oh, you know, we've got to add Fred to the team project. He goes into the Team Explorer, right-clicks on the team project, name goes into groups, and goes and adds Fred as a contributor. There you go, Fred. And then, of course, what will happen is Fred's going to get those 2 red crosses generally, because Fred's now got no rights or permissions, or was not given any rights or permissions to reporting services or SharePoint. Okay? So, factors leading to these problems. The number one is simply no awareness that you did need to manage that security in 3 places. Another contributing factor I've listed up there is the fact that you've got to configure it in 3 different places using 3 different UIs. And to make that a little bit worse, even the names of the permissions in those different areas were different. So in Team Foundation Server, if I made someone a member of contributors, in SharePoint that meant members. In reporting services, that had to be a member or be given the rights or permissions of browser. So 3 places, 4 groups, and permission set names are different. It's little wonder that initially people struggle with security in TFS. The good news is that's all changed in 2012. The bad news is I'm lying. Sorry about that. All of this actually stays exactly the same. because they are three distinct and different products with their own security models and so forth. If we have a look at the groups that we've got in TFS, for every team project we create, it creates project administrators, contributors, readers, and builders. My advice is, if you can possibly get away with it, just stick to those built-in groups and use simple role-based security. If you go looking around, certainly in 2010, there are 13 different places you can modify and change permissions and rights, if you really, really must. But trust me, more security doesn't equal more secure, if that kind of makes sense. If you can use a keep it simple approach, then security can often be a lot better, a lot more reliable for you. So in terms of getting those groups sorted and managing them, the best thing you can do is leverage Active Directory. If you create a team project called payroll, go into Active Directory and create payroll contributors, readers, payroll administrators and builders. Go and populate those groups in Active Directory with the appropriate users. I mean, that's what Active Directory is about, groups and users, and a little bit more. There's still this hard part. Once you've got those groups created, you've still got to go and grab those groups and jump across through each of the three products to add the groups in and give them the right permissions. Okay, so still a little bit of work there. But after you've done this, and let's face it, you do it once per team project. After you've done it, security becomes a lot easier. Joe comes to join the team. As a contributor, we drop him in one group in Active Directory. And that's all you need to do day to day. Now, this horrible experience that you're looking at on the screen is made significantly much easier with a tool from Codeplex that I hope all of you know about. So from Codeplex, you can go and download the TFS admin tool. Now, you've got to run it with administrative rights. The person that can do this has got to be elevated across all three products. But what they're able to do is they can click Add Users up here. They can go and identify the group they want. A dialog will come up and you'll say, I want them to be contributors in TFS. And it will automatically know what contributor equals in the other two roles for you. It'll give you some pending changes down here. You'll go and say Apply, and it will jump across all three products and set up security for you. And it's a tiny tool as well. I think it's like 1.5 meg to download. Now, it is built against, 2.1 is the current version, it is built against the 2010 object model. I haven't tried it with a 2012 box yet. You know, you will need to put on 2010 Team Explorer, you'll need to put on Service Pack 1. For good measure, you'll put on the GDR. And then it should work. I haven't tried that yet. I've been on the road since the release preview came out and haven't had an opportunity to look at that in depth. It is a Codeplex project, so if it's not ready, it's a call to action. Let's go in there and help them out and get that one working. All right. So moving on to the 2012 security. Management of security has moved largely into the web UI. Now, one of the key reasons for that is, of course, TFS on Windows Azure. You know, TFS Preview. What they're trying to do is they're trying to make it a very consistent experience so that, say, administration should look and feel the same regardless of whether your TFS server is on-premise or whether you're using a hosted TFS server in the cloud. So much of the administration now has gone into this web-based user interface. They've improved something in terms of allowing us to find out where people are getting permissions and rights. We find that Brian Keller has access to managed test configuration. Why? How did he pick up that right and permission? Was it through membership of a group? Was it an inherited right or permission? So one of the nice features in the next release is we can find out a lot more about the security that's there. I'm not going to go through each of these things for us. I think I've got about 3 slides there. So at a team project collection level, a number of groups are created for us. We can manage this through the admin console, the command line, or team web access. When you go and have a look at some of the server level groups there, This one can only be managed through the admin console or the command line tool. You can't use the web UI for server level groups. At a team project level, those groups remain the same. That's good news for us. There is one difference now. When we go and create a new team project, a default group is created and assigned. A default team, should I say. Okay, so that's one slight change there, and that can be managed in all 3 locations. So I want to give you a quick look at some of the changes in security and permissions in 2012. I'm just going to go across to Fabricam Fiber. I'm going to go up here to the admin screen. Now in this particular scenario, I'm going to go and have a look at my security. And what you'll see here are my team members, and I can have a look at the various security. Now, as I said to you, Brian Keller's got rights to manage test environments. So let's have a look at how he got those rights. If I select that individual user, manage test environments is currently set to an inherited allow. Okay, why? Where did that come from? So we now can move across here and click on why, and it will determine how that right or permission got there. And it shows us that through Brian's membership of the contributors group for the team project, that's where he picked up those rights and permissions. So tracking those things for auditability makes life a lot easier. And then I can change them here. I can go in here and say, well, look, now I want an explicit allow or an explicit deny. So managing security is a lot easier. You know, through that web UI, regardless of whether it's on-premise or hosted, we're able to do a lot more through that administrative interface. In terms of web access permissions, there's been a big change in here. In 2010, we had the idea of users with client access licenses, so they could go to Team Web Access and they'd have a fairly rich experience. They'd be able to look at source, they'd be able to look at builds, they could go in there and create work items and so on. But if Alan over here didn't have a TFS cal, we could put him into a special group, work item view only, or work item only view users group, I think it was. Great name. And if you went and put users into that group, when they went to the same URL for web access, they would get a very, very cut down experience. And that cut down experience would show them only what licensing permitted them to do without a cal. They could create their own work items, they could edit their own work items, but they couldn't see or edit anyone else's. So that's how it worked in 2010 today. In 2012, it's changed a little bit in a couple of ways. Firstly, we don't use that group anymore. But now, in addition to thinking about do they have a client access license, we now also need to think of the particular features they're entitled to through the version of Visual Studio they have. Okay, so it gets a little bit more involved for us. So this section just down here, we have 3 defaults: limited, standard, and full. Limited is the version, it's the equivalent of you haven't got a client access license. Standard and full then determine or are determined by the particular licenses you've got. So for example, if you have Visual Studio Premium, Ultimate, or Microsoft Test Manager, then that will entitle you to all the extras down here, the backlog and sprint planning tools, the request and manage feedback capabilities. So what you've got to think about is, if this is my dev team on this side of the room, generally what you'll find is the majority of you will be licensed at the same level, and there'll be a couple of exceptions. This is normally how it plays out. So it could be that everyone over here, I've licensed you at Visual Studio Premium level, but I've got a couple of my developers that have Ultimate, so they can do web load testing, performance testing, or some such thing. So I can go in here now and I can set a default. And in that example that I gave you, I would set a default there to say, actually, you know what? I think I got that scenario slightly wrong. If you guys were mostly professional, because as premium you actually get full as well, so my mistake. If most of you were just at professional, I could give you standard, and then I could elevate the other couple of people in the team. And of course, if there are some people without TFS CALs, then I could go in there and specify them as limited. Let me just show you how to do that. I'm just going to go up to Control Panel. I'm going to go across to Web Access. And down the left-hand side, you'll see Limited, Standard, and Full. So again, the main thing is choose an appropriate default. What are the majority of your users licensed at? So what I've got here is we've made the default full. The majority of my users have Premium or Ultimate. But I still have a couple of users without a CAL. So I might go in there and just add that user. Let's add Julia. And then I can go into Standard, and I've got a couple of people just with Pro. I'm trying to remember some of the other usernames on here. Julia, Brian. Can't remember. Let's go and find Annie. There we go. Annie only has Pro. So these are managed on the server so that when Annie comes to that web UI, Annie won't see those features that she isn't licensed for. She won't see things like the agile planning tools. Okay, so quite a change from the previous version. I wanted to introduce you to Teams. So Teams are a completely new feature for us. 2012 introduces a new way to subdivide our people working on a team project. And if you think about that for a moment, TFS, Visual Studio, is a team project. That's got an incredibly large number of team members on there. I might have a team with 50 or 60 users in it. Now, managing those people as a group of 50 or 60 is a fair bit of work. Invariably, what you end up doing today is you have your little groups, your little teams within the team project. And that hasn't been supported well at all by TFS. In the 2012 release, teams are a first-class concept, and that's very good news for us. We can go in there and say, you know, these 5 people are a team. They have their own backlog. They have and manage their own work, their own burn downs, but they're all within the same team project. If you have a look there, we may have a large group of contributors. These 5 people happen to work on the web team. And by adding them to that team, you see over here, they get their own backlog, they get their own burn down, their own task board to manage their own work. Conceptually, it allows me to do things like have a master backlog that feeds all of the requirements down, and I have multiple teams down here, and those teams can pull things into their own backlogs. They can monitor their work, we can work through the task boards and so forth. It works very, very well. One little gotcha that I will point out though, teams, what's their impact look like in terms of security? So what we've talked about so far is in Active Directory we may have a contributor group for this particular project. That contributor group is given the appropriate rights and permissions in all 3 products. Now you still need to do that. But if I go and add, say, Julia into a team, by default that will only add her to contributors within TFS. That will not give her any rights or permissions down at the SharePoint or reporting services level. So that'll be a common stumbling block until people become more aware of it. A nice thing about Teams is that you can delegate some administration of the teams. So for this team over here, I can say that Michael up the front is the administrator for that team. and then he'll have rights to add people or remove people from that particular team. But only at this level. You'll need to consider what's going on down here. And there are plenty of choices available for you. Okay, so I just wanted to call that one out because I think that's going to take just a little bit of getting used to for people. So let's have a look at how we go about creating a new team. Okay, so what I'm looking at here is the Fabricam Fibre web team. They have their own little dashboard, they have their own favourites here, they have their own burn down, they have their own backlog that they work with and manage. We can go up here and I can switch teams if I wanted to do that. What I'll do is go back to administration, back to Fabricam Fibre, and I can go in here and notice that we've got a root team of 5 users, we've got a web team of 4 users. I'm going to say, I would like to create a new team, please. And what's a logical name? Well, that's entirely up to you. If you've got 50 or 60 people working on your team project, what are the logical divisions? Are they physically split into multiple locations? That might be a good example. Do you say that these are the guys that mostly work on the web, these are the guys that work on the data in the back end? You'll already have those logical ways of dividing and subdividing a team. So what I'll do in here is we might just call it, might have the, wow, that's bad typing, the framework team. Now notice down here, we will add members of the framework team automatically to the contributors group for Fabricam, but that is only at the TFS level. I'll go ahead and create that team. And I probably should have shown you settings there, but I think the thing I was going to show you is going to move. So in the framework team, I can select that. And I'm currently logged on as Brian, out of respect for the fact that Brian created this virtual machine. So this is Brian Keller's VM. Have any of you downloaded that over the years? A few people? So the virtual machine that you're seeing here has been created by Microsoft as a trial, training and evaluation VM. Fully pre-configured with Team Foundation Server, Office, Visual Studio Ultimate. It's all pre-configured there, and I think Brian's written, for 2012, he's got about 18 labs there. It's not a small download, I think it's around 14 gig to download, but it is a free download from the Microsoft website. So if you've seen some great sessions here at TechEd this week, and you want to go back and start experimenting, start having a good close look at 2012, you can certainly download the ISOs and install it yourself. Or you can pull down this virtual machine, put it onto a Hyper-V host, and then you can work through the labs yourself in your own time. So it is time-bombed, it is a trial and evaluation version, but he's had those now for, well, at least 2010. It probably goes back as far as 2008. So they're fantastic resources for, just providing a playpen for team members to get used to TFS. All right, so, and Brian also has presented at least one session, one of the foundation sessions, maybe another, so hopefully you've seen Brian getting around. Okay, so we've created a new team there. I can choose to go and add more team members, and let's go and add Julia into that team. You'll notice over the left-hand side here, these are the administrators of this team. So I can choose to have one or more administrators for this particular team who can look after what the team's doing. We have an area specified for our team, so I can go into my areas, and you'll see that I now have a framework team area, and I can say that that's how we're going to identify work that is specifically or particularly pointed at this team. Okay, that's where we determine what work goes onto this team's backlog, how we determine their sprint backlog and so forth. Our Team Foundation Server Power Tools. So our Power Tools are, again, a really important thing. It's the utility belt for a TFS administrator. One of the things, Microsoft are not releasing a version of the Power Tools specifically for the release preview. So if you want to use your Power Tools, you can still download the beta version of those Power Tools for 2012. The link's at the bottom of the slide there. And those Power Tools for the beta will work with that release preview. Microsoft will be bringing out a version specifically for RTM. There's a couple of things that are going to change up there, but if you have a look through the list, firstly, the BPA tool I've spoken about a few times. Team Explorer enhancements that we've been using, the work item templates aren't there at the moment in this release. The TFPT command line's there, the check-in policy pack's there, although at least one of the policies from 2010 is now baked into the product. So that's good news. The process editor's there, although it's not complete, it doesn't allow you to edit all parts of a 2012 process template. The shell extensions are there. The test attachment cleaner is now baked into those power tools as well. So power tools are a big plus for us. Hopefully you're all using those. Yeah, I'd expect so. Once you pull those power tools down, we can go down to the Start menu, into Programs, into our Power Tools, and that's our little BPA tool. So just showing you one of them that you really all should be using a whole lot more than you are. I can go in there and say select options for a new scan. I want to do a complete health check. And when I click on Start Scan there, that's then going to go off and do a full scan of my server for me. And it's really great. It'll go and have a look at all your build agents, build controllers. It'll wander out across all the servers configured for use with TFS and give you a very good report on the overall health of that. With the power tools come out fairly regularly. If you look back at 2005, 2008 and 2010, each of them only had a single service pack. So after the release, the product team really just had one shot at, I won't say fixing things, but putting in little extras, making things a little easier for you. Conversely, the power tools, I think, what was it, last year? I think they shipped at least 4 releases. So every time a new version of the power tools come out, you want to pull down that new version. With the BPA tool, for example, with each newer version, what you'll find is there'll be more rules, there'll be more checks, and this information will be coming in from Premier Support Services. So as they find things in the real world, they add that to the rule set and try and head those problems off for all of us. So again, I can't stress enough the value and importance of that best practices analyzer power tool. And most of the other power tools are much like what you've probably, are much the same as the 2010 versions today. So to review, in terms of what we've talked about, we've had to talk about the upgrade process, what it looks like to upgrade from 2010 to 2012, whether it's an in-place upgrade, whether it's a migration upgrade, and hopefully I've pointed you in the direction of some great resources to try and make that upgrade experience a little bit easier for you. Firstly, the upgrade information that's in the installation guide is the first port of call. Then we learned that we can go and download the Ranger's guidance, and the Ranger's guidance adds on to that. It provides a number of real-world scenarios for us. It provides checklists and really makes that a whole lot safer and easier for you. Yes, sir. Question?
What about upgrading from RC to the final product?
So upgrading from the release candidate or release preview to the final version will be supported as far as an in-place upgrade goes. One of the commitments that Microsoft provide when they give you a go-live license is the fact that they will guarantee an upgrade path to the release version for you. So that's all good news. We've talked about upgrading from SourceSafe to 2010 and found that when I asked earlier, no one was still sitting on SourceSafe, so that's good news. But for anyone sitting on SourceSafe, that new wizard-based utility that will import either the full history or tip of projects from Visual SourceSafe will make that experience just a whole lot better and easier for you. We talked about maintaining backward compatibility, and we found that, and this is the direction you really hope they're going, that with every release of TFS and Visual Studio, that backward compatibility bar is held very, very high. So we can go back all the way through to Visual Studio 6, and those users supporting legacy code can check in and check out of a TFS 2012 server and can manage their work using our work item tracking system. So the compatibility bar is fantastic. And for 2010 and 2012, they can sit side by side on the same machine. And probably what I believe is for the first time, and I could be wrong here, at least half of the project types allow a developer on my team to open up in 2010 and work and save. A developer on the same team with Visual Studio 2012 can open the same project, make changes and save it. Now again, that's only for about half the project types. They are basically compatible solution and project files. That's the first time I think they've ever done that for certain project types. We had a look at how to upgrade the project features, which is probably going to be one of the most important things for TFS administrators. Once we get the server done, we need to retrofit all of these new features back into our team projects. And you saw that now with the enablement wizard, that's just made so much easier. Actually that's ironic. Yul's presenting a session today, the guy that wrote or was responsible mostly for that. Sadly, his session is happening right now, which is a shame because for a TFS administrator, it would have been really neat to see both of those. But that's all right. That happens. My session's better, I hope. The new configuration automation, that was a very quick look at a command line tool. Command line tools don't get us too excited, but for an administrator, the ability to go in there and to create those unattended files, to do a wide variety of administrative tasks is pretty good in terms of, allowing us to automate things completely, to have that consistency, the repeatability of certain admin tasks. I think that's a huge win there. We went through and talked about configuring permissions, and I gave you a quick overview of role-based permissions using Active Directory to try and make that easier, and pointed you at the TFS admin tool, which saves a lot of grief and effort. Yes, sir? So if I can repeat the question, is TFS 2012 fantastic? Yes! Wasn't that it? So what does Active Directory synchronization look like? So in 2010, one of the big challenges, which I am not sure has changed in 2012, I can't answer, I'm afraid. But the question that he's asking was that even if we set up Active Directory, if we set up permissions the way that I spoke about, if a user joins the team and I go and drop them into contributors in Active Directory, the challenge that we find there is how long has that person got to wait for those permissions to take effect? True? And for 2010, what's been your experience? Half an hour, it depends. That's kind of true. And I don't know how that's changed in 2012. So to be clear, when you add or change permissions, because you've got each of these three distinctly different products, each of those products wants to try and cache some credentials to try and make it a lot quicker and easier for the authentication process. They all time out at different things. They'll all expire tokens at different times. So if you drop a user in, it's an indeterminate period of time before those permissions will take effect, and that's certainly very frustrating. I mean, it's nice to say that through good planning, we go and, Fred's joining us tomorrow, so we drop him in today, and overnight it just magically happens. We all plan well in advance, don't we? Of course we do. So unfortunately, I can't answer that question specifically to say, has that changed? Invariably, it may well have changed as the versions of the prerequisites change. So whether reporting services, whether SharePoint's changed that in newer versions, how they expire and time those things out, that may have changed. I'm not aware of it, sorry. All right. We had a look at support for teams, just very briefly. We went and created a very simple team, and we just learnt about one potential gotcha, and that is by adding a person to a team, adding them to contributors, that's only going to give them rights in TFS, not the other two products. Okay, so hopefully that'll head off a little bit of pain and aggravation for you. Any questions? Let's go. How about upgrading the lab? Is that easy and fantastic? Not quite and yes. So it's not necessarily overly easy. Is it fantastic? Well, of course it is. So there is some documentation on upgrading the lab. That is mentioned in both the resources that I've pointed you to. So there are some steps that you will need to do. And I'm also a little unsure at the moment about the support for SCVMM 2012, what role that plays yet. So I can't quite tell you necessarily just how easy that's going to be, but it is very well documented. Another question? Is there a migration path from an on-premise TFS server to the TFS previewer in the cloud? So at the moment, the ALM ranges through their TFS integration toolkit. Willie's on his blog post has given us steps on how to do that today. But as the product or the tool moves towards the release, we're going to expect to see those tools. They're just not there today. Okay? There's been no public announcements about it. I'm not privy to any of that information, but let's face it, in terms of helping organisations onboard to that service, they're going to have to make that a lot easier. They're going to have to provide tools and capabilities for that. You'd have to. Okay? Yes, sir.
I know you shouldn't have to say that you were in the case that you have to move the TFS project to a different collection. Is there any guidance for that?
So nice question. So we want to move a TFS project from within one collection to another collection. Is there any guidance on how to do that? Fundamentally, that's not an easy thing to do. And the way that you worded your question, you already knew that. You know, the unit of movement is really the collection. It's designed to move collections around. I'm not aware of any easy way of grabbing a single project out of a collection. I mean, all of that information is pretty tightly coupled to what's going on inside that collection. I would expect there's probably there would be some guidance there, but the guidance, it'll be a very manual process. It'll be a lot of work for you. I believe the TFS integration toolkit from the ranges can help you with that, moving work items and moving source across. But remember, there's almost always going to be a cost. It's not a simple, hey, drag and drop a project. It's not going to work, ever. Well, I shouldn't say ever. So you had a question?
So distributed TFS servers around the world with latency problems.
Mm-hmm.
The proxy just buffers the source code. Then the possibility to buffer also the web items.
Well, we shouldn't ask that question. So, in terms of a distributed team around the world, we've had the TFS proxy. The TFS proxy, in my personal experience, has been very widely misunderstood. As a proxy, people expected that it would be used for all manner of things, including if the link goes down, people can keep working, and they thought it worked almost like a replication system. It's renamed a little bit. It is a version control proxy, because that's all it really did. Microsoft are working on having that work with work items as a proxy or cache of work items in addition to source control. Exactly where they're up to with that, I can't answer. I simply don't know the answer to the question. I know that it's on the cards. I know that they're working on it. I don't expect that it's in the current preview release. Whether it'll make RTM or shortly thereafter, we might have to go and find a Microsoftie down at the booth and ask them that question. But they're well aware of it. There's certainly plans afoot to improve that experience in situations for distributed teams. I just don't know where exactly they're up to and what their public statements have been on that. Okay, let me just do a quick time check. I'd hate to make anyone late. Oh, we're down to a minute. So I need to just finalise some slides there. I'm more than happy to take some questions after the event. So in just jumping through that, hopefully you're now feeling far more transformed. There's some related content there, so there are still some sessions available to you today and tomorrow that are quite relevant for developers. There's some excellent hands-on labs, and most of these are Brian Keller's hands-on labs that are available in that downloadable virtual machine that I spoke about. There are some changes afoot to certification. I think we're going to see some announcements around probably an October timeframe for certifications. So there will be at least the current exam updated for 2012 and possibly at least a couple more. So those announcements are due out around the October timeframe. Okay, some extra track resources and a big reminder at the end there to make sure you fill in your evaluations. So guys, hopefully you've learned a little bit. I've pointed you in the right direction for a bit of TFS admin. Thanks for coming along so early and finding the right room. Enjoy the rest of your TechEd.